the world woke up shaken. In less than 24 hours, two pillars of the international order were hit hard. Europe plunged into a new political crisis, and Russia launched the largest air assault of the war on Kyiv. At the center of this storm, Donald Trump once again captured attention. The United States president, presenting himself as the only leader willing to confront adversaries and call out the weakness of allies, quickly used both the Ukrainian tragedy and Europe's turmoil to reinforce his geopolitical message. In the early hours of September 9th, more than 800 Russian drones and missiles struck Ukraine, hitting for the first time a central government building in Kyiv. The attack was devastating, not only in terms of casualties, but also for its symbolism. No capital, no institution appears beyond the Kremlin's reach. Meanwhile, in Paris, the French government collapsed after a crushing vote of no confidence, exposing the fragility of one of the EU's central pillars. Trump seized on both developments. On one side, he pointed to Europe's inability to resist Moscow. On the other, he framed France's political breakdown as proof that the continent is no longer capable of leading itself, let alone the wider West. His message was clear: either follow his hard line or remain spectators of their own decline. The tone was not diplomatic or calculated. It was provocative, direct, even relentless. While Russia demonstrates strength on the battlefield and Europe reveals weakness in its institutions, Trump positions himself as the figure who raises pressure and says aloud what many prefer to avoid. The West is divided, vulnerable, and on the verge of losing strategic initiative. Do you believe Trump is right to highlight Europe's fragility at such a critical moment, or is he simply using global chaos as a stage for his own rhetoric? Share your opinion. If Russia's assault on Kyiv was a military earthquake, the collapse of the French government was a political shock that reverberated across the continent. The fall of François Bayrou is not simply another domestic crisis. It is the clearest sign yet of the paralysis gripping the European Union. 3 prime ministers in less than 2 years, a picture of a democracy unable to maintain stability at a moment of mounting global pressure. Official statements point to austerity measures, spending cuts and debt. But behind the numbers lies the deeper problem: a continent torn between its social welfare commitments and rising demands for defense spending. France, the Eurozone's second-largest economy, illustrates the impossible dilemma: cut welfare and face unrest in the streets, or borrow more and risk a financial spiral. Trump was quick to comment. While European leaders emphasized unity and institutional stability, he framed the French collapse as further evidence that Europe cannot stand on its own. To him, it is not an accident. It is a reflection of a system stretched beyond its limits, surviving in theory but failing in practice. Meanwhile, Russia's escalation amplified the contradiction. As Macron scrambled to form an emergency government, Putin sent his own message through drones and missiles. There is no time for parliamentary debates, no space for indecision. In Moscow's logic, hesitation equals defeat. In this environment, Trump positions himself as the leader willing to say what others avoid. Supporters see this as proof of his strength and directness. Critics argue he is exploiting Europe's misfortunes to advance his political narrative. Either way, the imagery is striking. Paris politically paralyzed, Kyiv burning under attack, and Trump presenting himself as the one raising pressure on a divided West. While Europe stumbles and Ukraine suffers under fire, another front is heating up: the Caribbean. What initially seemed like a routine naval operation quickly turned into a direct message from Washington to Caracas. On September 2nd, United States forces struck a vessel that the Pentagon claimed was operated by the Tren de Aragua criminal group. The strike killed 11 people and sent an unmistakable warning: the United States is prepared to use military force in the region if necessary. The incident triggered an immediate response. Venezuelan fighter jets carried out a highly provocative flyover of a United States warship days later, raising tensions to dangerous levels. Instead of backing down, Trump doubled down, stating that such operations would continue and leaving open the possibility of further military actions. Within his administration, senior officials went further, openly discussing the prospect of regime change in Caracas. The episode has revived a modern version of the Monroe Doctrine, Washington reasserting its dominance in the hemisphere, just as Russia, China, and Iran deepen their involvement in Venezuela. The Caribbean, long considered a secondary theater, is once again a central stage in global competition. For Trump, the escalation in Venezuela fits neatly into his broader narrative. While accusing Europe of weakness, he shows that in the Western Hemisphere, the United States is ready to act decisively. The message is twofold. To rivals, no one is out of reach. To allies, only those who keep pace with Washington's hard line can be trusted. Yet the risks are undeniable. A miscalculation could trigger a full-scale conflict with Venezuela, a scenario that would destabilize not only the region, but also global markets, particularly energy and trade routes. Still, Trump appears comfortable with this uncertainty. To his supporters, it is bold leadership. To his critics, it is reckless brinkmanship. In the Middle East, escalation has reached a point of no return. The Israeli strike in Doha was not simply another military operation. It was a deliberate rupture of the region's unwritten diplomatic rules. Israel directly targeted senior Hamas figures on Qatari soil, at the very heart of negotiations mediated by the United States. The message was unmistakable. Diplomacy has been replaced by physical elimination. Trump's reaction added another layer of tension. While Israel quickly claimed full responsibility, speculation grew that Washington had quietly approved the operation. The White House avoided an outright denial, a silence many in the region interpreted as tacit support. To Gulf allies, this suggested Washington's firm alignment. To adversaries, it was a warning that no capital, not even those traditionally considered neutral, is truly safe. The Doha strike represents more than a single attack. It signals a new doctrine where mediation hubs themselves can become battlefields. It also reflects Trump's approach: impatience with protracted negotiations and preference for decisive, often forceful outcomes. Yet this strategy carries grave risks. By undermining Qatar's role as mediator, the strike has shattered one of the last viable channels for dialogue. The question now is how Iran and its regional partners will respond to such a bold escalation. Supporters argue that Trump's stance projects strength and deterrence. Critics warn that intimidation could be the spark that ignites a wider regional conflict. Do you agree with this analysis? As the Middle East burns and the Caribbean edges toward confrontation, Asia faces its own political shock. The sudden resignation of Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has created a power vacuum in one of Washington's most important allies. Japan, the world's fourth largest economy, is now without stable leadership, just as tensions with China and North Korea intensify. The symbolism is striking. While Russian drones devastate Kyiv and France struggles with political paralysis, Tokyo reveals the fragility of its leadership. Ishiba's departure is not just another cabinet reshuffle. It marks the unraveling of Japan's post-war image as a bastion of stability. For the first time in decades, the ruling Liberal Democratic Party has lost its parliamentary majority, leaving any successor dependent on fragile coalitions and political compromises. Trump was quick to frame the resignation as further proof that the United States cannot rely on allies facing internal crises. His message was blunt. If Japan with its economic power cannot guarantee political stability, then Washington must assume a central role in the Pacific. The implications stretch far beyond domestic politics. Markets reacted with volatility, negotiations on trade and security were cast into uncertainty, and rivals such as Beijing and Pyongyang now see an opportunity to test United States resolve. Each Chinese maneuver near Taiwan, each North Korean missile test, takes on new weight against the backdrop of Tokyo's instability. For Trump's supporters, this reinforces his image as the indispensable actor on the global stage, willing to point out uncomfortable truths and assume leadership where others falter. For his critics, it is opportunism, exploiting an ally's weakness to elevate his own narrative of power. While Europe falters and Asia enters a leadership vacuum, Latin America emerges as another theater of global tension. The trial of former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro at the Supreme Federal Court is not a routine judicial process. It has become a political spectacle with international ramifications. Accused of plotting to overturn the 2022 election results, Bolsonaro divides Brazil, polarizes society, and places the region's largest economy at the center of global attention. Trump has openly weighed in. He labeled the trial a witch hunt, and in a calculated move tied it to his trade policy toward Brazil, imposing tariffs as a form of indirect pressure. This effectively turned a domestic trial into a piece of Washington's geopolitical playbook. It is no longer just about Brazilian judges, but about the weight of United States influence on a sovereign nation. At the same time, Washington sanctioned Justice Alexandre de Moraes, the key figure presiding over the case, accusing him of oppressive censorship. The result is a surreal scenario, a national judicial proceeding transformed into an arena of international contestation. For Bolsonaro's supporters, Trump's position signals solidarity, proof that the United States is willing to challenge what they see as an illegitimate process. For critics, it demonstrates that Brazil has become a pawn in the great power rivalry, its sovereignty overshadowed by foreign intervention. The Bolsonaro trial illustrates a growing trend, domestic courts serving as stages for geopolitical battles. What happens in Brazilia's Supreme Court is no longer confined to Brazil. It ripples outward, affecting alliances, markets, and the stability of the entire region. The past 24 hours have not been a series of isolated crises. They mark the arrival of a new era of global instability. Israel turned Doha into a battlefield, undermining regional mediation. Russia launched its largest air assault of the war, striking the political heart of Kyiv. France revealed that even advanced European democracies are vulnerable to collapse. Japan exposed a leadership vacuum in the face of mounting regional threats. Brazil transformed a courtroom into an arena of geopolitical confrontation. And the United States, under Trump, positioned itself not as a distant arbiter, but as an active, often aggressive protagonist willing to call out weaknesses and impose conditions. The so-called polycrisis is no longer an abstract concept, it has become a lived reality. Each crisis feeds the next, creating a chain reaction that reshapes the global balance of power. Capitals once considered untouchable have become targets. National parliaments have crumbled under pressure. Domestic courts have turned into international battlegrounds. Trump, with his combative style, presents himself as the leader who highlights what others refuse to admit. The West is divided, its allies fragile and its rivals emboldened. For some, this is the decisive leadership needed in uncertain times. For others, it is a dangerous gamble that risks accelerating global turmoil. The real question is no longer whether new crises will erupt, but which one will erupt first and who will have the strength to control it. Share your view in the comments.